Hello and welcome to episode 8 of Animediate, the one that rhymes. Today we're going to be talking about Mob Psycho 100. We're shaking up the format a little bit, as is the format for Mediate, is to not have a consistent format. We're just going to watch one or two episodes together, and then go away and finish the rest of the show in our own time, and come back and talk about it, just because of the super virus stopping us from being able to do this in person. But getting on to Mob Psycho 100. Okay, basically it's about this kid, Mob, who has powerful psychic powers, and he has a part-time job working at like an exorcist like agency, and he has to manage, dealing with the psychic world and all the problems that come with being how old is he? Middle schooler? High schooler? He's some age. Doesn't particularly matter too much. He's dealing with problems. And it's a very pretty show. It's very well animated. It's got a unique art style. It's from the same person. It's originally adapted from a manga by One, who is also the One Punch Man guy. It's Mob Psycho 100, ranked 101 on my anime list. That's so close to being very cool. Anyway, you guys hyped?
Yeah, most def.
Yeah, it's been one of those shows I've kind of heard a bit of.
Yeah, that's true.
Never got around to watching.
Yes, I totally forgot, but we absolutely, me and Jono had watched the first, I think, 2 or 3 episodes of this together at some point in the past.
Yeah, it's the problem. I can't feel it, because I know there's quite a few shows I feel we both watched the first few episodes of, and none sort of registered with me particularly.
Yeah, this one was interesting because, what was her name? I don't know if we dox people on this show, I keep forgetting. But, was it Chloe? It's not Vanessa, was it? Your girlfriend at the time, Jono, was watching it with us. I remember that. And when she came around, I was like, yo, you want to watch Mob Psycho with me and Tony? And I'm like, yeah. Well, you were like, yeah, presumably.
I love how I've completely blanked this moment out of my memory. This is fun.
What was her name?
It would have been Lottie.
Lottie! Oh, for fuck's sake. I was so close with Vanessa. Yeah, Lottie came
It's
around.
funny you should mention Vanessa. Someone called Vanessa has just, that I do not know at all, has just, sent a dodgy message to me going, "Hi, gorgeous." So,
Oh my god.
is trying to chat me up right now.
You know what this is? This is my psychic power of precognition activating because of Mob Psycho 100. So yeah, do you remember anything of Mob Psycho 100 from 3 to 4 years ago, Jono?
I don't. I don't even. Yeah, don't even remember watching it. So that doesn't bode well, but we'll see. We'll see.
Well, Harry and Ethan, you guys ready? You guys hyped?
Yeah, I guess. As much as I can be for anime.
Well, you should set your expectations higher because we're in the upper echelons of ranks now.
But that's what you said about Symphogear, and that wasn't...
That's 7 out of 10. You know.
You of all people know that the only valid ratings are 8, 9, and 10.
Yeah, you beat me in my own logic there, I guess.
7's basically 1, and 8. So if it's not a 10, it's just shit. But anyway.
So we're going to watch the first episode and then talk about it?
Should we record while we're watching the episode?
I don't know if that would be very interesting.
No.
I don't think that's a
Okay.
good idea.
We'll see you guys after we've watched the episode. Bye. We've just gone away and watched the rest of the show, and now we're back. We've seen it all. What are the opinions of people? Ethan.
Why did you single me out?
Because it's your lucky day.
I think it's quite decent. It's one of the best anime series that we've done on the podcast so far. I think it's got a large selection of pretty memorable and unique characters. I think one of the biggest problems we've had with a lot of the anime that we recorded on this podcast is the characters kind of sort into two categories, the male and the female, and you can't really differentiate inside those categories. Whereas with this, I feel like every character does stand out. I know who Mob is. I know who Reagan is. I know who the blonde guy is who has a new hairstyle every time you see him. I know the Dimple as well. You know, they kind of, I think they stand out pretty well, and that's good because it means that you can follow the plot fairly
You've
closely.
got a strong main cast that you're interested in and always interact with each other in interesting ways, especially the dynamics between Mob and Reagan, and also Mob and his younger brother. They're sort of some of the main forces behind the show, really, especially in the mid and like late sections of it, that really for me sort of power it through. But even going on into just the more, well, for now, the slightly more throwaway characters, but I feel like they are going to come back, of the other people with Esper powers but aren't that strong. Sort of just in their design, they're already a lot more like recognizable and unique than most of the characters we have come across doing Animediate so far.
You've got Minecraft Steve.
Oh my god, Harry made the exact same joke when we watched it together.
You've got the guy who's the driver from Redline with his massive hair. You've got a great character.
Oh, what with the Elvis Presley hairstyle? Is that who you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think Jonathan's spot on, and even if the names don't come to me straight away, I think because the way the characters are designed and the way that they're physically drawn out and portrayed, you can single them out, and you know when one's talking, you know that it's them, if that makes sense. I get that a lot with the upper echelon, actually, where they all have really interesting designs, and they all just stand out by themselves pretty well, and that's a great thing to have with something like anime, where you're watching it in a foreign language, and sometimes it's hard to tell who's talking in a particular scene, especially if it's the kind of show where the drawings themselves aren't super animated or super detailed, if that makes any sense. So you kind of have to be watching to tell what character is talking, but it's definitely easy to follow, which is often with the anime that we watch on this channel, we get about 6 episodes in. I couldn't even tell you the main character's name. I feel that distant from the show, and you know I feel so far away from the action and what's going on, and this show kind of captivates you a lot more than a lot of the other stuff that we've watched so far. I think
it definitely is the best one so far. Well, not counting, I don't know, the ones that broke the formula. But yeah, I think it, as you said, the characters being really distinct sells the show quite well. I think in combination with their unique like personalities, the fact that they're always conveyed in like super expressive and like out there ways. You know, just even watching the last episode just now, where there's like a cutaway to someone having like a very intense facial expression that's drawn in like charcoal on like grey paper is amazing. You know, that's the kind of stuff you don't see super often in anime. It definitely does look this good most of the time.
It's probably playing about with the fact that it is a drawn format, that it is animated. Yeah, I think it really makes use of sort of feeling quiet and sort of saving frames in the quiet moments, but then really going into it when it comes to anything that's more action or experimental, or sort of it really likes to experiment with colors and sort of new effects, and maybe the little blotchiness coming here that just really adds a sort of especially because it's trying to often depict this idea of sort of abstract psychic powers. It does a good job of sort of doing that without falling into. I think it's something that could get fairly formulaic with anime things. I mean, I was initially worried when seeing the design of the spirits in this because it reminded me of the noise from
Symphogear.
Symphogear, and to me that's those are for me some of the weaker parts of this is the designs of the spirits because they're just like jelly monsters. But the actual way that the psychic powers exert themselves and everything like that feels very unique and interesting.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying, and pretty much everything you guys have said. Mentioning how like well defined the characters are, and what you've just said about like the designs of the creatures and like the more stylistic kind of elements of the show. From what we watched the first episode, I was worried that it was going to set into a formula, that every episode was going to be Reagan doing his thing and being loud, and there was going to be lots of those like kind of irritating moments. And I think Ethan can talk about when we were watching the show and Dimple first showed up. I was just like, oh, for fuck's sake. Like, this character's just going to be incredibly annoying. But I actually ended up really liking Dimple and Reagan just because of you didn't spend the whole of every episode with them and they were being really loud. I think it really well contrasts those kind of louder like moments and those comedic moments with the more introspective things. So I really like the character of I don't know his name because I'm an idiot, but of Mob's brother. Like when he was first introduced, I thought it was a great concept for a character. And just, I guess, that kind of trifecta, and then you've got that blonde guy kind of rounds out the cast. I think that there's a great balance of personality types, and you've got louder and quieter characters, really over-the-top flashy jokes and like more understated kind of deadpan humour. And I think it's a really well-balanced cast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I really like blonde guy. Fuck, I've also forgotten his name. His arc is probably one of the more like overt ones and like well realized ones in the show. I think I especially love how clear cut it feels of how he has this interaction with Mob. He has these delusions of grandeur. His
episode begins with him just proclaiming how he's the main character in this world. I made a note of that, and then just a helpful little arrow saying said by not the main character.
So but the fact that he like immediately becomes so wise like after he's like had his confrontation with reality is quite funny, but also makes me quite like the character.
Yeah, his arc is just very much squeezed in that like about 10, well I guess a bit longer with that is happening throughout the fight, but the main moment where he's like turns is just when he gets knocked up into the sky, just looks down on the earth and is like, maybe I'm not going about this the right way. And just completely changes his character. But still at the same time he kind of still carries on that air of, although he's kind of become a lot more humble now, he still is almost overexerting his wisdom, basically. He still is kind of very up himself, but just he's up himself in trying to not be up himself.
Yeah, it's a weird donut shape that he has twisted himself into. Yeah, I don't know. I just like the gag where his hair gets cut off and he has a wig and his wig gets cut off. It's funny.
I think that episode, the one where you kind of have that fight, is probably the best episode of the show. Just because I guess it kind of subverts a lot of anime tropes. Like at this point, we've spent a lot of time with Mob and like understand like he's very powerful. And so you've seen him reach 100, at that point. And we've just been introduced to Dimple, who's like, oh, okay, it's going to be the annoying side character and stuff. And then we finally meet who looks like the rival. And the episode before kind of ends with like, oh, they're going to have a big like Dragon Ball Z fight. But then the episode it completely kind of subverts your expectations, and it almost kind of completely dismantles this kind of character. And that kind of comes to Jesus moment he has when he's in the sky, I think is the climax of the episode. I think it's like a really, what in a worse anime would just be like an overly animated fight is actually quite like a deep kind of character study of this guy. I thought that was my favorite episode anyway.
I think Harry's right. That was my favorite episode as well. It was out of the entire first half of the season, it was the one that I watched where I was definitely the most engaged. And I think Harry is right. I think the easy thing to do would be to have the previous episode set up this character, and then it ends, and the next one's going to be this huge fuck off fight, basically. That's just going to kind of burn your eyes. It's going to be so epic. But I'm glad that it doesn't do that. And actually, while watching the episode, what I thought the most was that this blonde guy is kind of like the anime equivalent of the Joker in The Dark Knight, where his whole shtick is he just wants Mob to break his one rule. He just wants him to actually get involved in the fight, and Mob basically spends the entire episode just kind of basically maintaining that one rule, that one integrity that he has, where he's not going to engage. He'll just carry on, I guess, taking the hits until he basically is forced to break that and inadvertently fight back. And it's a really, really great moment in that episode. I think it's very good because Harry mentioned this earlier on, and I do agree with him. But I think most people would say that they like the fact that there are sets of episodes in this season that are sequential, in the sense that things will carry on and it won't be neatly wrapped up by the end of one episode. But I actually think what makes this show stand out more to me than the other anime that we've watched is that every episode, well, most of the episodes, even the ones that aren't very sequential, that are kind of just, okay, this is just something that Mob gets up to in this episode, and it's kind of, it's going to end by the end of it, and it's not really going to get brought up again. What I like about those episodes is that to me, they stand out, and towards the start of the show, you get a lot of episodes where it's just, okay, this is a new spirit he's got to fight. He's got to use his psychic powers. In the first episode, it's a biker gang. I can't remember the second one very well, but the third maybe is the one where he has to infiltrate this cult where they all wear masks, and it's very, very creepy and weird. But those episodes, to me, the ones that are very self-contained and episodic, are among my favourites, just because I could finish the show, and the ones that are more sequential, the ones that kind of just carry on some sort of story, are the ones that get lost with me. Whereas those ones that are, like I said, very self-contained, are the ones that I found really, really memorable. And actually, where the show started to lose me a little bit was around the halfway point after the episode where they fight, where there was a few episodes where it just felt like Ritsu was becoming more important, but there wasn't anything that really made the episodes feel like they stood by themselves, separate to other episodes. And it kind of won me back towards the end in that series of episodes where they introduced this massive organisation that's basically trying to dominate the world. And those ones are quite sequential. But within them, you have an episode where Ritsu gets. In fact, there's a really good episode where I think the entire thing is set in one alleyway. They managed to spend 20 minutes in one alleyway, basically. Getting involved in a fight, and it's when Mob discovers what his brother has done. He's basically gone and beat up this massive group of people. And then I think it's the one afterwards where they infiltrate the organisation after Ritsu's been captured. And I really, really like that episode, because the gang is basically there to rescue Ritsu, but they get separated into different factions, and you basically go and see them as individuals facing off as various members of the upper echelon. And not just the upper echelon, but kind of different people in that army that they've been trying to raise, and that's an episode that kind of has its place in a series of episodes where there is a through line between them, but that episode kind of has a sort of a self-contained story. I feel like I'm rambling a little bit at this point, but I'm just trying to say basically that I like the self-contained narratives that this show has, and as well as the ones that are trying to have some plot carry on over a series of episodes.
I agree. I think when it gets going and it has those more sequential, like, style stories where it says, like, okay, we're going to start the arc where we introduce Claw, and you're going to have a prison break. I think the show has an incredible sense of, like, momentum, just the way, like, fights go from one like explosive location to the next it's just really like gripping. I think like watching it just for the action, even if the story wasn't as good, it would still be like one of the most pretty shows because it's just so poppy and has like such a unique like style. But when that's layered in with like all the characters like meshing really well with the story, it's good.
Yeah, I feel slightly different to Ethan, where for me, I was sort of ready to feel kind of meh about the show, having watched the first few episodes, where it is just very episodic. And it was once it sort of properly started bringing in the character of his little brother that it really sort of picked up for me. This was also when I began to watch it at a much faster speed, which meant for me the episodes, as well as losing their sort of cohesion that they had anyway, I was forcing them to lose their cohesion because I was just like watching them at up to twice the speed, meaning I was sort of watching this overarch happen sort of quicker and more in one more biteable chunk.
See.
So yeah, I think that's a bit of the uniqueness of how I watched it. But yeah, I think those are the moments that gripped me the most, and they're the moments where, because of that, I have made the least notes about it. Mostly just noting down like one line from each episode or something like that. But yeah, my feeling, to me, the strongest moments is the sort of middle of it, where it's having the brothers kind of play off each. Well, I guess more the little brother having his moments, getting his powers, and then seeing how he uses them, and then that sort of building up to this feeling that there's going to be some sort of conflict, or at least an emotional something between the two, that then sort of really delivers in the fight before the little brother gets captured.
Yeah, the brother stuff I think is pretty great. I like the laughing episode. I wasn't the biggest fan of the club thing, and that might just be because I've just watched Kill la Kill, which is like the same joke but better. That it's every club and he's got a joke. I felt like, I think that's episode 2, and then a little bit more in episode 4 as well, maybe. I felt like that was slightly weaker. But yeah, I mean that fight, which is the best episode, and then you have more stuff with the brother, which I think is very strong. The end of the show, Tony said it's got a lot of kind of momentum, but a criticism I had is it's just less visually interesting than the rest of the show, because they kind of go to this facility. So the last 3 episodes of the show are kind of just the same background. It's just kind of fighting very well designed characters. I love the character design. Someone mentioned Paprika, and it kind of reminded me of Con, in that every person has like a very unique face. Like there's no kind of like background NPCs. But yeah, I felt like it got a little bit too repetitive of just like fighting someone with unique powers in a corridor, and then they're in another corridor fighting another. I could have done with maybe like 10 less minutes than we actually have. But
yeah, and there wasn't much set up to these people as well. It was like, oh, you've seen their character design in a meeting. Maybe someone has briefly mentioned one thing about this guy. There's not much of a build up to each fight, because it is just, oh, you defeated that guy, now you're fighting this guy. This guy's taken out this guy. There is nothing between these two at all. They're just gonna fight now because they're on different teams.
See, I think that episode, the one where they go to rescue Ritsu, what I like about it is those, I guess, smaller sections in the episode where particular pairs of characters will face off, because I think it allows for the more, I don't want to say surreal elements of the show, but the more visually interesting ones. So there's a part where one of the characters fights off against some guy who can kind of utilize fire. I think he's a pyrotechnic or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that by itself was a really memorable part of the episode, because I hadn't seen anything like that before. And Harry talks about how the background is quite monotone throughout those episodes because it doesn't change very much. But I actually think the way that it counteracts that in moments like that are really, really, really good, where it's just not the same corridor anymore. It's basically a room that's on fire and then covered in ash, and it just seems like a completely new, strange setting. And there's also a moment later on in the episode where this girl has kind of been able to surround Mob with a massive group of mannequins. And it's got a very, very bizarre tone, but it's something that I really, really like a lot and stuck with me. And I think that's what I like about that episode a lot. Maybe it could have done with 10 minutes less of I guess more of the same, but for me it wasn't more of the same. I was interested. It basically had a massive dump of new characters with interesting designs, and what I really wanted to see was the way that their psychic abilities manifest themselves physically. That's what I was really, really interested to see, and I think that episode really delivered on that. By the end of the show, you could show me a photo of all of the characters in the upper echelon, and I could tell you, oh yeah, no, I remember this character. This is what they could do. This is what this person could do, and I think that's what that episode does well for me.
Yeah, I think what it has is it has a lot of aesthetics to it, and sort of as it goes on, there's kind of a drop in plot and emotional cause of it that then picks up again once Raygun walks in, and then sort of starts just spitting his morals whilst also being a con man and ridiculously charismatic. And he sort of changes up the pace of everything that's going on. And with him showing up, you have flashbacks sort of confirming what you've kind of been picking up between the relationship between him and Mob, where he has, despite not being a master in like having psycho abilities, he still has instilled a lot of good lessons to Mob that have like stopped him from becoming sort of like the upper echelons of Claw.
Johnny, I think we have exactly the same opinions on this show. Like, everything you've said on this podcast, I've been like, yeah. We found something we perfectly agree on.
Yes.
Because I was going
wait till we give it a different score, though.
Would be funny. I was just about to say when Reagan shows up, I feel like it gets a lot stronger. And I really like the finale. How it's like you kind of from episode 1, you've got this idea of what Mob and Reagan's relationship is, and like nothing really changes. It's more that you get a better understanding. Like it's not really like he's being exploited or he has like no power. His kind of power comes from Mob's belief in him. You know, it's quite sweet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Reagan's along with Blonde Guy. I think that the moments where they like slow down the show and like speak to some fucking villainous, creepy psychic guy and be like, actually, you need to learn a lesson about being a good person. And it's like, it doesn't come off as corny, it just comes off as very like endearing and like, yeah, I think it is like portraying a good way to live your life almost through the lessons that you get given through this show, you know.
I'm not sure how I personally feel about the finale, though. I thought it was a good episode, but I think it had the opportunity to do something that I really wanted to do, and it didn't quite do that. Because the episode before ends with a really shocking thing happen, which is Reagan basically being cut across his back, and you think he's dead, and then in the maybe the first minute of the next episode you find out he's not dead, and he was pretty much completely unharmed. What I thought that's not the problem that I had. My problem was that the way that they explained that and the way they tried to justify it was Mob had basically transferred his powers somehow into Reagan, or he'd kind of absorbed them for himself, and that's why he was so powerful. What I would have actually really liked to see, I don't know if you agree, is that his entire persona throughout the show is he is a con man. But it would be so great if this entire time he actually did have psychic abilities, but he basically did want to wait for the moment where he actually had to use them. Because the whole show he's basically telling Mob, alright, these are the little fishes, you go deal with them, I'll basically hang back, right? And you, for the first minute you see him, you know, okay, this guy's completely full of shit. But it would be great if he wasn't, if he actually was just insanely powerful and did want to wait for his time to shine, when Mob was not powerful enough.
Yeah,
think
I think it would be funny, but ultimately it would lose out on some of the strength of his character if he
yeah,
was
it's
just
true.
telling the truth in those moments. Because a lot of his strength comes from the fact that he doesn't have these powers at all, and that is why he is such a useful mentor to have for Mob. And he's the like he's one of those examples of like how sort of Mob is thinking, yeah, I've got these powers, they mean I'm sort of good in this area, but there's areas where I'm not so good as my brother. There are areas where he is not as good as Reagan, which is in the way he sort of interacts with people and can convince people, and sort of, yeah, those sorts of things.
I guess
I think ultimately it would struggle with the narrative I feel the show is trying to create of we all have our own skills. That
Yeah.
if it just sort of turned around and was like, oh no, actually no, this guy just is very powerful.
That's true. I guess the approach that I'm taking more is of a comedic one, which I think is one of the stronger aspects of the show for me. I do find it quite funny. I'll admit the comedy isn't exactly reinventing the wheel or doing anything groundbreaking. A lot of the time, it is pretty harmless. But when it comes to anime, that's the kind of comedy that I really, really want to see. And throughout every episode, there will always be moments that make me chuckle and make me laugh. And I don't. I guess we had it a bit with Neo Yokio and a bit with SAO Abridged, which are my two other favourites that we've done on the show so far. I mean, my favourite series that you've picked, Tony, have been the ones that I have found the funniest, as opposed to the ones that are trying to be funny or trying to have a comedic edge and just completely falling flat. And some of my favourite moments throughout. In fact, I think every character, come to think of it, does have a moment that has made me laugh or has made me chuckle. Even the characters that towards the start I thought, okay, these are going to be the ones that I get sick of pretty quickly, like Reagan, like Dimple that Harry mentioned earlier. But Dimple has a really, really funny moment where it's not even really his moment, but Mob is basically reminiscing on all the great times that he's had with him, and it plays this nice montage. But then the montage just shows times where Dimple has basically just done stupid things, like teach Mob how to use X-ray to basically X-ray vision to basically look at women without their clothes on. And similarly, Reagan has. I found this moment so funny, where it was basically. I think what it did so well is that it harnessed my anger in that moment, where basically Mob walks into an art gallery, and he basically gets kind of cheated into thinking. Well, he doesn't fall for it, but the way that the way that the art gallery person has made it look like is he's basically broken a vase, and basically they've just taken advantage of this character. But then Reagan comes along and he basically says, "All right, how much was the vase? 5 million yen. Oh yeah, you roughed up my shirt. That's 1 million yen. You yelled at me. That's another 1 million yen." And he just stacks on another few, and he says, "Okay, right now we're even. We don't have to pay for the broken vase anymore." And I found that so funny.
That is the only note I have for episode 7, which is just the con artist off that those guys have, and yeah, I think that is one of my favourite moments of the show. And then my only note for episode 8 is just that Reagan uses Himalayan rock salt, which just made me think of you, Ethan.
Oh yeah, I know. Harry said something similar when we watched that together.
Yeah.
Yeah. He just has a massive, just a rock of Himalayan salt, and yeah, it made me think of my own grinder.
I don't want to bring it back to that conversation you're having about the finale. I do think it does both, in that there's a brief moment where it has the joke of like, oh, Reagan's had powers the whole time, but then it has the stronger thematic realization that it's Mob's belief in him that's almost given him the power.
Exactly.
So I do think it does have it both ways there, and that's why I think it's so effective.
I suppose that's true. Yeah.
I do. I know you said you weren't a fan of it because you just came off Kill la Kill, but I do like the whole club thing that Mob has going on. The fact that there's a great fake out at the end of episode 2 where he, instead of joining the lazy slackers club and doing nothing, he's like, no, I'm gonna embrace personal growth I'm gonna join the fitness club. And the fact that these like incredibly jacked people keep coming back as this like recurring like element of support for Mob is great.
Yeah, I think it was one of the areas where because early on I wasn't so sure about the show. Seeing the way they were handling the Body Improvement Club was where I was like, oh no, this is a good show. That it didn't just go for the obvious, oh, they're jocks, they're not going to let them. There was like, nah, they're nice people that are just interested in being healthy. Of course they help people out. Of course they just let these people use this room that they don't really need to use. They are nice people.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's very kind. Yeah, I think the second season as well does a good job of building on the message of this show. Um, yeah, it's got a very kind worldview. I think. Ultimately, I think something I heard about Mob Psycho being said is that it's a show that believes in like the goodness of people, and I think that's a very good message to put out in a piece of artwork, especially something that's about like evil psychic organizations trying to take over the world. Having Reagan come in at the end and is like brushing off their shirt, being like, "Look, you need to shut up, wisen up, get a job, stop messing around with your little toy swords." I think I don't know. I think it's endearing. It's quite nice. I like it.
Yeah,
8 out
I
of 10.
mean, in the sort of ending moments with him, especially, I was sort of getting this feeling of, with particularly where American politics is, where you've got your like edgy, usually right wing people, with their like guns, basically just very much doing that being visually edgy thing, and like, oh, we're gonna influence the world and all this, to have sort of Reagan come along and just kind of be, nah, you're all just kids with toys. Uh, it's sort of where I feel a slight resonance with where things currently are. Um, but yeah, I do agree with that take that it's something that kind of is, believing in an inherent goodness.
So, is there anything else you guys want to say, or can we go to the moment?
I guess I'll quickly say that I think one of the strengths of the show, and this could just be a personal thing, is that, like you say, it's about the kind of goodness of people. The kind of the final sequence of Reagan and Mob kind of going out together is very similar to that first episode, but the change hasn't come from within the characters. I think it's come from your understanding of them. I definitely felt the relationship in the first episode, whilst kind of humorous, was kind of is more exploitative. But then when you kind of understand their dynamic further, it kind of it reframes what is basically like a similar kind of scene. It's like a completely wholesome and fun. I found that interesting. How not only do I think the show is kind of subversive as a whole, but the changes. There are some character arcs, but the changes, and especially in that core relationship, kind of come more from the audience's understanding of the characters, which I really like.
What would you give it, Ari?
I don't know. Come to me. I don't know yet. Do you want to go first, Tony?
Oh, I think I'm sticking with an 8 out of 10. Probably could be better if I wasn't forcing this into like some weird system grid thing, or I already have a 9 and 10 out of 10 planned. But that's just me. That's just me. I think it's really good. It's one of those shows that I keep thinking of because it's just so unique in its like visual style and very memorable with its characters, and it's a good message. Yeah, watch it. And season 2, it's also out. Watch that too. Do I have to keep vamping until someone else can think of the score to give?
Yeah. I think for me it's between a 7 and an 8, and I'm not sure which side to land just yet.
Do you want me to go next?
Yeah.
You get a bonus point if you agree with me.
I think you've picked a good show here, Tony.
Thank you, Ethan.
Yeah, it's true. I look back at the shows that you made us watch towards the start of this podcast, and I think, you know what, it's almost worth it to have gotten to this point now where we're just out of the bad, we're out of the storm, basically. I think it is good. I'll give it a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I think I've got to disagree with Tony about the 8 because I think I'll also give it a 7. You know.
Yeah, and I've got to agree with Harry, so it's a 7.
You know what? I was only
Pretty
one
good
off.
though. It's pretty good.
That's close. That's not bad. I'll take it.
No, we are through the veil now
Well,
of bad and into good.
we are through the veil, and then we're going to go back into that veil for episode 9 out of 10, trying out some amazing shows on our quest to get everyone to agree with me. God, what a noble quest it is. Thanks for watching, everyone.